Thanks, Ollie. Hi, everyone. I'm Kishan, co-founder and CEO of Spoonshot. It's great to be here today to present our insights on the future of alternative protein. At the end of this presentation, I'll share a URL with you where you can download these slides. Just before we dive in, here's a quick intro on us on Spoonshot. We build food and beverage innovation intelligence, and using the predictive power of AI and the domain knowledge of food science, we're able to see consumer needs early, translate them into trends, and map out the innovation opportunities they present. Our technology is powered by more than 22,000 types of data sources across 20 different types of food and beverage data. That's everything from research papers to chef communities, from food reviews to news media. Even though our innovation research platform has only been live for about a year, our intelligence is already used by 6 of the top 20 food manufacturers in the US. To download and digest our research, please go to spoonshot.com/white papers. So why alternative protein? We asked you, the food innovation and technology community, to decide. First, we asked an open-ended question to the future food tech community to create a list of all the topics that you're interested in. From this, we shortlisted 4 topics, and perhaps unsurprisingly, you voted to learn more about the future of alternative protein, which features strongly as a theme at this event. And most importantly, all of the insights in this presentation today are powered by big data and algorithms using methodologies that are completely explainable. So let's dive in. There's a Swedish supermarket called the Climate Store, and it's been developed by one of the country's best-known brands, Felix, and it's become the first in the world to use a food's carbon footprint as the basis for setting the price. Foods that have a higher CO2 footprint, like dairy and meat, are more expensive than lower carbon foods. The price tag highlights how much carbon is emitted by the food. And the idea here is to encourage consumers to choose food that have a lower impact on the environment and the climate. Such a revolutionary pricing system has the potential to completely change the way consumers think about and buy their food. And while this is the first in the world to do such a pricing system, we believe that this is going to be the kind of conscious purchasing for the future of food. Carbon labeling on pack is actually a great way to promote transparency and spread awareness of what is perhaps one of the biggest concerns of our time, climate change. And we're starting to see brands, retailers, and restaurants warm up to the concept of carbon labeling to showcase their commitment to sustainability. And while this is still a very nascent concept, in 2018, or since 2018, the interest in this area has grown by over 400%. And for this topic and all others presented today, we even have 12-month predictions around the future of these trends. Now, we've been hearing about companies' carbon neutral pledges for a long time now in connection with tackling climate change. But carbon negative is the next step in these earth-friendly options. This essentially means removing more carbon from the atmosphere than is emitted. There's been a 600% growth in interest in this area over the last 3 years. There's been a 600% growth in interest in this area over the last 3 years. And Brewdog just became the first international carbon negative beer company in the world. And they bought a 2,000-acre forest. And Smithfield has become the first major protein company to commit to becoming carbon negative in all company-owned operations in the US by 2030. And that Smithfield's pledge for the long term actually puts in a spotlight on the importance of alternative proteins. These non-animal based proteins are significantly more environmentally friendly than the meat, since the requirements like land, water, and feed are far less. And our data shows that interest in alternative protein is seeing a steady rise, having more than quadrupled over the last 3 years. Also, the pandemic has shown us the positive impact of travel bans and lockdowns on the environment, which has resulted in a 9% reduction in carbon emissions this year versus 2019. And we're seeing new processes, ingredients, and formats that are enabling cleaner and more sustainable sources for alternative proteins. The next iteration for this category is going to be a shift away from the traditional plant sources like soy and pea to ingredients that are even less resource intensive. We've seen 3 major trends that have been driving the interest in alternative protein space: conscious purchasing, health, and clean eating. Consumers, and particularly younger consumers, are increasingly showing interest in ethical, eco-friendly and sustainable products. They're willing to buy brands and support causes dear to them, in part because of the convenience, a lack of knowledge about how else to contribute, and even through laziness. This means that brands need to more than ever walk their talk in terms of their sustainable credentials. So on the previous slide, you saw how overall interest in conscious purchasing has grown by almost 80% in the last 3 years. And when we look specifically at millennials and Gen Z, we saw that interest in with this consumer group is significantly higher. And there's a very strong correlation too. And it's these younger people who are the emerging and future consumers, of course, and will continue to seek out products that fit into their value system. And they'll also be instilling that value system into future generations. Now let's look at health. Consumers definitely believe that alternative protein is healthier than meat. And even meat consumers are warming to such products. For example, nearly 10% of consumer conversations online about meat also talk about vegan and vegetarian food in a positive light. And we've also found that a significant amount of research into alternative proteins is connected more to health than it is to sustainability concerns. We decided to dive deeper into this health driver and look at the connection between functional benefits and alternative protein. Weight loss or weight management and antioxidants by far top the list. And now, while they may not actually be as healthy as consumers think, plant-based proteins have definitely had a part to play in helping consumers moderate their meat consumption. Switching from a meat-based lifestyle to a plant-based one isn't for everyone. And there's been plant-based and meat-blended products that support that transition. There was an 80% growth in interest in blended foods in the 2 years prior to the pandemic. Certain brands have now started to combine animal and plant-based ingredients in products such as sausages, burgers, and even milk to help consumers gradually acclimatize to the difference in taste and texture. And now looking at clean eating, the demand for clean food and drink just keeps growing. Consumers want their food to be minimally processed and have just a few recognizable ingredients and be free of any nasties. However, the plant-based protein space has not been able to guarantee the clean aspect of their products. The average number of ingredients for plant-based products was 60% higher than for meat-based products, and this will put off consumers as alternative proteins become more commonplace. At present, fewer than 1% of plant-based proteins products have a clean certification. Soon enough, consumers will start to scrutinize these ingredients in the plant-based protein products and object to the high number of additives that many include. We also analyzed reviews of meat-free and plant-based products to understand the problems consumers face. Here are 2 examples. I don't like chunkiness. I'm open-minded about fake meat, but this was truly disgusting. Our research showed and revealed that the most common issues in this area are about taste, flavor, and texture. Now, as clean eating makes its way into the alternative protein space, manufacturers are going to have to turn to products that minimize additives as well as the impact on the environment. This means looking beyond the traditional plant sources, and this is where microbial fermentation comes in. This has been used to make a number of food ingredients for years, but its use in the creation of proteins is relatively recent. And over the last 5 years, we've seen significant growth in the use of microbial fermentation to create alternative proteins and functional ingredients that are sustainable and efficient. These new age products can also better address the issue of taste and texture that plague the current set of meat analog products. Now, thanks to fermentation, we're now seeing new protein sources coming to the fore that are sustainable and efficient in terms of production. Interest in one such source, MYCELIUM, has more than doubled in the last year. And given the speed at which these sources are manufactured at scale, they also can be priced nearly at par with meat. MYCELIUM, for example, can be produced in different shapes in a matter of days. And these protein sources don't need the kind of spaces that crops do. Production can be done in tanks like those for brewing. And MYCELIUM and another emerging protein source, ALGAE, have impressive nutritional profiles, high protein content, and rich in micronutrients. Also, algae is one of the few non-animal sources of the vitamin B12, which is often missing in vegan and vegetarian diets. Interest in algae as a protein source has increased 400% since 2018. And these sources also have the advantage of being somewhat familiar to consumers, mushroom-like in the case of MYCELIUM, and of course seaweed-like in the case of algae. And this will be very important to highlight when introducing such products to the market. Now, lab-grown meat has been around for a while, but thanks to fermentation methods, it's become much more commercially viable. Prices per pound have dropped from a staggering $1.2 million in 2013 down to around $50 per pound today. Interest in lab-grown meat has grown 160% in the 2 years prior to the pandemic. And this year, in fact, just last month, the world's first lab-grown meat restaurant opened near Tel Aviv. The chicken cell-based meat is said to be indistinguishable from traditional meat. And just today, the Singapore government has given US startup Eat Just the green light to sell its lab-grown chicken meat. And this could be the world's first regulatory approval for clean meat that does not come from slaughtered animals. And working with new ingredients and experimenting with these flavors to pair well with them can be a slow and tough process. Spoonshot's innovation research platform leverages AI and food science to take the guesswork out of that discovery process. MYCELIUM products, which have a neutral flavor, can take on flavor options that pair well with traditional meat versions. Take, for example, if you're looking for a novel flavor pairing for a steak alternative, consider the combination of beef meat and saffron. So, what does all this data and research tell us about the future of alternative protein? Well, in the next 10 years, we're going to see three things. The accuracy and rate of fermentation will evolve to a point where meat-free products are customized to individual consumer preferences. This is going to be the decade of food personalization. Secondly, as much as nobody wants another pandemic, we need to accept that there likely will be one and prepare accordingly. But a shift to protein alternatives could help avoid the breeding grounds for such diseases, in this case factory farms. And over the last week alone, turkeys and swans in Europe have been hit by a new strain of H1N1. And in the US and Denmark, farmed minks have shown a new strain of coronavirus. And lastly, with consumers increasingly keeping it clean in terms of their eating habits, there will be a new wave of claims centered around clean eating and clean proteins. Also, claims that we currently think of as premium, like GMO-free, will become the norm. But it's not the end of real meat. Let's take the restaurant chain Burgerville, whose number 6 burger is said to be carbon negative. And yes, it's meat-based, and it's the result of regenerative agriculture. So it's even possible for meat to not be so harmful for the environment. That's all, folks. Thanks for watching this presentation. I hope you found it stimulating, and you can download a copy of these slides at spoonshot.com/FFT. Thank you very much.